Live from the Bama Insider Studios, this is the BamaInsider.com podcast. My name is Trey Anity. I'm joined with Tony Sukalis, Tyler Wadrup, and Kyle Henderson. The whole gang is here. Guys, spring football is this week. Friday is practice number 1. It's going to get rolling quickly. We're here, and We made it. Somehow we've gotten to this point in March, and it is getting rolling. But let's talk about something else to begin this podcast today. Something that a lot of people are going to be affected by in Vegas. A lot of people that follow college football are already talking about the Heisman Trophy Award. There's some early favorites and definitely some early favorites from the University of Alabama. Let's get into it. Justin Fields opens up as the number 1 favorite. Let's break down him, Trevor Lawrence, and even Mac Jones to begin.
Yeah, so if you're looking from an Alabama perspective, Mac Jones is probably the best guy. It's a quarterback award. So if you look at, who's going to win the quarterback battle, I would call Mac Jones the favorite at the moment. So from an Alabama perspective, he would be a guy. I think if Bryce Young was to win it early enough, he'd be a guy to look at as well. If you're looking for a non-quarterback from an Alabama perspective, I think you'd look at maybe Najee Harris, running back that, kind of was the bell cow back last year. I don't know if he'll be able to keep that role this year with so many backs in Alabama's backfield, but those would be the 3 that I would circle as, if you're looking at possible candidates, that's how I'd go with.
Yeah, and that's how Vegas sees it right now as well. Mac Jones is tied for 6th in the Heisman odds nationally. Bryce Young, a little bit of a surprise to me, tied for 17th. And then Najee's tied for 19th, along with Talia.
Yeah, that's Talia. I mean, I think the reason why Talia's in there is the fact...
Stop. I mean, you think Talia is seriously in this Heisman debate is kind of...
We're going by...
And I know it's in the article, but I think it's almost ludicrous to put him in the Heisman. I'm going to call it what it is. I just think that I think Mac Jones... And by the way, what's up, everybody? I know you guys missed me last time. I'm here with Trey, with Tony. I'd really appreciate if you guys drop us a note on the audio. It's one thing that we're trying to improve. So in my opinion, we have some work to do in that realm, but we're working towards a better audio system. So we're just having fun with it. And I know spring football just almost here. Today we're talking about the Heisman Trophy. Tony will have an article tomorrow, and Mac Jones, Najee Harris, rightfully so, up in the mix. For personal reasons, I think Jalen Waddle is a guy, if used correctly, could be a guy that really does a dynamic job this year for Alabama. I think if C. Sarkisian is creative enough to use him, Jalen Waddle, I mean, how could you not, right? I mean, he's got it all. He's got the speed, and with him and Devontae Smith coming back, I mean, it's such a dangerous combination. So, I haven't read the article. I know I looked over it, but where was Jalen Waddle, Tony? Was he in that mix?
Yeah, he was a little bit further down. We're using FanDuel's Sportbook, so that's where we're getting our information from in terms of odds. I think, what is Waddle? You have the numbers in front
Waddle
of you,
was tied for 27th. He was
tied for
plus 8,000.
That just seems way too low.
I don't know.
Right?
Wide receivers don't win this award.
That's true.
Yeah, like the last wide receiver to win the award was Desmond Howard.
The thing about Jalen Waddle for me is his performance against Auburn, and what we saw from him during that game was just something almost magical.
Is he going to get enough stats as a wide receiver that's going to overpower a quarterback look at Fields. Fields a guy that can run.
But I think when you look at a guy like Desmond Howard, he was used in a special teams role, right? He
Sure.
was used as I don't know, did he return kicks?
Yes.
So he returned kick. I know he returned punts, but Jalen Waddle, in a sense, could almost be, he's the punt return. I don't know. I doubt he'll return kicks. Maybe he will. He did have a kick return.
Well, that's what I was thinking with Howard. I knew he returned on special teams. Off the top of my head, I don't know if it was kicks, but that's the thing. It's not can Waddle do enough as a receiver to win the Heisman. He has to do enough as a special teams guy. Because every time he scores a touchdown, Mac or whoever wins the starting job probably throws it, and everyone's eyes are just going to go to the quarterback on those.
And you got quarterbacks that can run and throw. I don't know. He'd have to return like multiple kicks, and then he would have to be far and away Alabama's best receiver. I think the fact that Devontae Smith returning might help Alabama. Actually, it will help Alabama, of course. Mm-hmm. But in terms of like if you're going to go Jalen Waddle's Heisman odds, I think it kind of hurts it because I think in order to be it's so hard to be that guy as a receiver. I mean, look at Amari Cooper, the numbers he put up. He was a Heisman finalist, but that's about as close as you're going to get, and he was the guy.
But see,
Waddle won't be that.
Was he as explosive as Jalen Waddle in terms of what he could do from a punt return or kick return perspective?
He had a lot of big plays. I mean, he didn't do anything from the kick return, punt return.
Like
but
the big plays are different from an explosive player like Jalen Waddle. For example, I know Alabama likes to use Slade Bolden in the Wildcat package. I think that's great. It's good to get Slade Bolden on the field. But imagine a player like Jalen Waddle in that Wildcat package. You're talking about a player. Now, I know Slade can throw the football and he plays scout team quarterback, but I think in a situation where it's 3rd and 1, first of all, give the ball to Najee Harris. But there was a couple times where they gave it to Slade Bolden. I'm thinking, like, Slade Bolden, 3rd and 1. Like, I mean, he's a good athlete, but let's go with someone with a little bit more power, in my opinion. Jalen Waddle could be that role. So I see Jalen Waddle, and I get your point about Amari Cooper, but I think with a player like Jalen Waddle, he's just so versatile of a player that could give him the nod. So if I'm a betting man, and if you're out there and you like to go to Vegas and you like the Heisman odds, then Jalen Waddle might be your guy. But
you would have a lot of money if you won. Mac Jones? Go ahead.
I don't see Mac Jones winning the Heisman. You almost can't win it without solid rushing numbers. And I mean, do we think Mac Jones is going to show the dual threat ability to be in the Heisman conversation?
He's got to win the job first, too. I mean, he's got to beat out Bryce Young. I think whenever you are the top quarterback on the nation's number 1 or a nation's top 5 team, you're a Heisman contender. So I think if you're betting on Mac Jones, that's what you're betting on, is the fact that he could go undefeated with Alabama. I do think that a guy like Justin Fields, or even if Bryce Young was to win, if you could tell me that Bryce Young was going to win the quarterback battle and do his thing for a whole season, I would say he might have a better chance just because he has that dual threat ability, like you said. But this is a quarterback award. That's the reason why I don't think a guy like Waddle will win it. And it also goes to a winner. So, quarterback winner. I think Mac Jones is probably the best option Alabama has because I think he's going to win the quarterback battle. And if he does, then he has a possibility of being a quarterback on an elite team.
Well, I think for Waddle, Jones, and even Tagovailoa in this conversation, it's going to come down to minutes. Tony, you seem to be the most faithful that Talia has an argument at this time.
I think the only reason why he was on the list is for the exact same reasons I said with Mac, is if he does end up winning the quarterback competition, then he is a quarterback on an elite team. I think when you look at Bryce Young and you look at Talia, if we're having this Heisman discussion, they've not only got to win, they've got to win in time to compile the Heisman number. So if Bryce Young wins the job in week 3, he probably doesn't have enough time to compile the necessary Heisman numbers to beat out whoever else. Because he's not just competing against fellow Alabama players. I mean, he's competing against the nation.
I disagree. I think you can win the job in week 3 and still win the Heisman, especially if you're Bryce Young and Bryce Young lives up to the rushing and passing numbers that we think he could put up at a college level, especially in Alabama's offense.
We got to be thinking Justin Fields is going to be doing the same things at Ohio State and he'll have 3 extra years.
I think it depends on how
3 extra weeks. Sorry, not years.
It depends on how Ohio State's season goes, though, because ultimately, and I think you kind of hinted at this already, you have to be in a team in the hunt, and you have to be in a team that's playing games people want to watch. If Bryce Young wins the job in week 3, Alabama has Georgia that week, right?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So Ohio State, are they playing a marquee game in those first couple weeks that people tune into?
They're going to play plenty of marquee games as well. And if we look at the stats and in Lawrence as well, it might have bigger stats.
Well, let's say Young does win the job, and week 3 moving on, he is the starter. Is that enough time to find a way to win the award?
I think we're wasting time talking about this quarterback battle. I know everybody wants to talk about a quarterback battle going into the 2020 season. I mean, Tony and I have talked about this before. I think a lot of people don't appreciate currently Mac Jones, and Saban's going to give every opportunity to Mac Jones to win this quarterback position. And I don't even think he has to win it. I think he already has the quarterback position. You look at what he did against Auburn. I know people are obsessed with those 2 interceptions. I get him. They were both pick sixes for touchdowns. But let's fast forward to that. Let's look how he acted when he was the guy. He really took over during Michigan. He was 300 yards with 3 touchdowns. Nobody even talked about that. They just wanted to talk about other factors factors about players leaving or coming, and I get that. It was the time of year, but Mac Jones is the guy. I mean, this is the guy who has the most experience, and Bryce Young, may very well beat him down the road, but I just think that we're wasting time talking about Bryce Young being the guy. That might be something that's not popular to say, and I think he's going to be the guy eventually. But I just think that Mac Jones has all the experience. Saban's is so loyal, right? I mean, he's the most loyal guy. I just think Mac Jones is the quarterback going in.
So let's say Mac Jones wins the job, and Jalen Waddle, maybe they try to run out that wildcat in some form. How do they work him into that offense to keep Mac happy and keep this offense flowing correctly?
I mean, I think the wildcat will just be used sparingly, but I mean, Mac's the guy. I mean, he's super athletic. He knows the offense. He knows Sarkisian's offense. The guys like him. The guys want to play for him. The guys want to play with him. Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, John Mechie. I mean, all these guys coming back. Najee Harris. I mean, there's camaraderie with this offense. Maybe we're spending too much time talking about the quarterback position, but I feel strongly that Mac Jones is the guy going into 2020.
One position that we don't talk about enough, Tyler, is going to be that offensive line that's protecting Mac Jones and the rest of this offense. Let's get the rundown on this group a little bit and kind of break down who is going to need to step up in that position group.
Yeah, I think when you talk about Alabama's offense and what they have returning, I think you forget how good this offensive line is. I mean, it was a Joe Moore Award finalist, and they're losing one guy. Now, that one guy could be a top 10 pick in Jedrick Wills Jr., but they're still losing just one guy. So the interesting thing will be how they plug in that starting five. I mean, ideally, or maybe the easiest way to do that would be to move Evan Neal from left guard to right tackle, and then insert somebody maybe like Emil Ekiyor. You could do that. Another option I think that's popular with Alabama fans too is to move Evan Neal over to right tackle and then put in Darian Dalcourt and then switch Landon Dickerson to a guard position. I think those are your two biggest, easiest transitions, and that's up for debate on what's the best, the best way to do that. Or there's some people that think that putting in Dalcourt would be the best option, and there's some people that think that putting in Ekiyor would be the best option. There's a few other ways you can do it. You could even keep Neal at left guard and put in a guy like Tommy Brown. I mean, you can get really creative with this. And Alabama has a lot of versatility, but my preferred starting five would be Alex Leatherwood at left tackle. I'd put Emil Ekiyor Jr. at left guard. I'd keep Dickerson at center because I think you need a veteran there. I'd keep Deontay Brown at right guard because that's the position he played last year, and then I'd have Evan Neal at right tackle.
Yeah, I certainly like that. I think I'm with Tony on that. I think Evan Neal, when you look at his frame, I mean, I think he did an amazing job as a guard, as a freshman. Think about that. He's a 6'7", 360-pound offensive lineman. He comes into Alabama. He's a natural offensive tackle, but he plays guard, and he had the most snaps actually behind Shane Lee last year for Alabama, which is amazing at guard. But I think, like Tony said, you have Alex Leatherwood, you have him at tackle, you have Evan Neal at tackle, and I think you have some versatility within the interior offensive line. Darian Dalcourt, like Tony said, is an amazing. Will he be a redshirt freshman?
He's a sophomore, right?
He'll be a sophomore. I guess we'd have to check on that. I mean, he's very, very talented. Landon Dickerson, very, very talented. He did a great job last year at the center position. Emil Ekiyor, like Tony said, another guy. He had an injury during the beginning of this season, but I think he's a guy with a lot of talent as well. And then Cornbread, right? Deontay Brown. I mean, he's did a great job last year as a guard. So that offensive line is, I mean,
yeah. And then you got guys like Tommy Brown. I think is a solid guy that could enter the mix at one point. You got a guy like Pierce Quick is a solid guy that could enter the mix at one point. You got Chris Owens, who was in competition for a starting job at center. So Chris Owens is the guy that can play center or tackle.
Or tight ends, right?
Or tight end. And Dickerson can play pretty much any of those positions too. What do you think about that center role? Would you want an experienced guy at center, or would you want a Dalcourt, or what's more important,
I mean, I think there's advantages to both. If you start a younger guy at center, a guy that's going to be around longer, that can become a strength you can build around in future years. So I think that's sort of the payoff. you have this mostly veteran group, guys that are used to playing together, assuming that those are the guys that end up staying together for the starting offensive line. You know, if you start a younger guy at center, maybe you bring him along and then he's the strength going forward. Or, like you said, you could slide somebody in that's a little more experienced and, you just might have to address center sooner than you would otherwise.
I think it's going to come down to, too, I mean, if they feel like Darian Dalcourt's head and shoulders better than a guy like Emil Ekiyor, let's just use that, because if you look at the starting five, that might be a competition even if they're at different positions, right? So who's better fit at the line? If you put Darian Dalcourt at center, you still have experience on either side of him in Deontay Brown and Landon Dickerson. That might actually help. It's not like he's going to be alone on an island at center with inexperience on either side. So that could help if you really think Dalcourt's the best option. But I just like having, the center more often than not at Alabama has turned into a team captain. I think that could happen with Landon Dickerson. And I just like having that guy that kind of is the leader of the offensive line, which I think Dickerson can be, at the center position.
To sort of shift things back, a guy that I feel like we sort of gloss over when we're naming these guys. Tony, you mentioned him. Tommy Brown is one of, I believe, 2 returners for Alabama's offensive line that Pro Football Focus grades above 80 in run blocking. I mean, I think Tommy Brown could be a guy that kind of emerges and maybe people are week 2 or 3 surprised. Who? Tommy?
Yeah.
Like, why is he in the mix? But, I mean, so far he's done a good job with the snaps he's been given.
Yeah, I think he's a talented guy and a guy that I think, has a bright future at Alabama. The thing, I guess, against Tommy Brown is it seems like such a natural fit to move Evan Neal to a tackle position. And if you do that, where's he going to play? Because he's not going to play over Alex Leatherwood. He's not going to play over Evan Neal. Tommy Brown's a guy that's going to provide depth, I think, and heaven forbid one of these guys gets injured. It's nice to have a guy like that can play in that tackle spot.
I think when you look at other emerging offensive linemen, I think Pierce Quick is a name to know. He's a guy who really spearheaded that recruiting class of 2019. I think he was Alabama's first commitment. He's a guy who would play guard, and I think he's a guy that you have to watch. Amari Kite out of Thompson High School, he's another guy to watch. Darian Dalcourt, as we talked about, very good. But I think, in my opinion, at the center position, you got to go with Landon Dickerson, at least going in. I think, I think I'm kind of one of those guys that you want your center position to be a captain. I fall into that group. You had Bradley Bozeman a couple years ago, and then it was Ross Pierce-Baker, and I
Brian
think
Kelly before both of them.
Yeah, so those are guys who can really get the offensive line and kind of get everybody to hold it, kind of hone on in and be that captain. But the thing about Landon Dickerson is he's different from those guys because even though he's probably just as talented, if not more talented, he's kind of nasty, right? How many times do we see him, pounding on some guys or making some blocks to the side of, film and jarring a little bit? He has a lot of fire to him, which is great. I just think he's different than those guys, and he'd get you a penalty every now and then. He's kind of nasty.
And I think just barking out orders, in Baton Rouge this year on the road. I want a center. I want my center. That's the center's job. I want that guy to be somebody that's done that before. And by the time, they get into the heat of SEC play, anyone that they're going to play there is going to be ready for it. But I like the idea of having that experience that, and I'm all about not shaking things up because it worked last year. The offensive line worked last year. So shake things up as little as possible, and if you just move Neal to right tackle and insert Ekiyor at left guard, that's not a lot of changes, and you can kind of move forward from that.
Hey, here's a question for y'all. Do y'all think the offensive line will be better?
I think so. Yeah, I think because you're keeping so many and you're losing Jedrick Wills. Jedrick Wills was the best offensive lineman last year, but you only lose one, and I think everyone else gets better.
I think it almost has to be better because Tua Tagovailoa was just so talented at passing outside of the pocket, making plays outside of the pocket. Mac Jones is a great playmaker and potentially Bryce Young as well, but it's not going to be the same playmaking abilities outside of the pocket. This line's going to need to step up in some areas to get better. But if you're an Alabama fan, what's your biggest fear at offensive line this season? Tony, you want to start?
Always injuries, right? But there's not if there's a position group I'm probably the least worried about, it might be this one. It's so deep, it's so talented. You look at the monsters that Alabama can line up up front. it's like an NFL offensive line. So I guess it would be that, let's just say you put Evan Neal at tackle and he doesn't re-transition well into tackle, but I don't see that happening.
That's exactly
I don't see that happening. Yeah.
I was going to say the exact same thing. I think we all have this, this vision of Evan Neal being just this amazing offensive tackle. Maybe he's not a great offensive tackle, and then you kind of have to go back to the drawing board and, you look at a guy like Tommy Brown or Amari Kite or someone else steps in, but that would probably be the worst case.
And even that worst case doesn't seem so bad. Let's just say absolute worst case, he just can't play tackle the position that he played in high school, which would be weird. But let's just say he can't do it. He stays at left guard. You put in Tommy Brown at right guard, and you've got a pretty good offensive line there.
The thing about Evan Neal is it's incredible. Like, I can't talk enough about him, and I love getting him on footage just because he's, like I said, 6'7", 360, and he moves so well. He has great athleticism. I mean, he can bend his hips. That means he can get down. And, his arms are just incredibly long. I mean, I eventually think, without question, we'll see him on Sunday. So I think he's going to fit in just well to offensive tackle.
Now, on the other side of the football, the defensive line is an area of focus for a lot of people coming into this season. Let's get a breakdown of that position group as well, and maybe what player we're looking to see the biggest impact out of this season.
I'm interested in seeing LeBron Reyes return back from injury because I think he could be a real leader of that line. You talk about things that have to get better. I mean, this defensive line, it has to get better. It has to provide some pressure because we've already talked about in our last pod that lack of pass rushing mixed with an inexperienced secondary. I just don't like that mixture. So I think you can maybe get some more pass rushing from the defensive line. They started 2 freshmen on the defensive line for most of the season. So having, more experience in that unit, I think could be huge.
I want to see how Christian Barmore does with a larger workload. Because he was incredibly efficient with the workload he got last year.
Yeah, he's probably the best pass rusher they have up there. It's all about just keeping him in a more well-rounded aspect of his game. I think if he can really develop into the most talented guy they have over there. Look at a guy like DJ Dale. I really like his game in the middle as well.
Yeah. Hey, first of all, this is something new that we're bringing to BamaInsider.com. So thank you for liking and subscribing. We appreciate you guys being here. One of the things that we always try to focus on is the audio quality. I'm huge on audio, and I know as a viewer, you want your audio to be really good. So if you have any feedback regarding the audio, if you would like to see it improve, go ahead and comment in the comment box. That's something that we're always working on. So, there might be a couple hiccups because this is relatively new, bringing 4 people on, but that's something that we are working on. So please know that. I think for me, when you look at the defensive line, Freddie Roach, who's a new defensive line coach, I think, replacing Brian Baker, I'm curious to see how he works with the defensive linemen. I'm curious to see how he is as a recruiter. But I think being, everybody's excited because he's Alabama, played at Alabama. He's been at Alabama before, and he has a lot of younger defensive linemen to work with. Christian Barmore, as you guys said, DJ Dale got a ton of playing time. Byron Young, Justin Ebogbe. I mean, a lot of these guys are younger, and they have a lot of experience that's going to carry over to the 2020 season. Fedarian Mathis is a guy that we probably don't talk a lot about, but he's a veteran on this team. LeBron Reyes, Tony said, he's making his comeback from 2020. So there's a lot of guys, a lot of talent in that room. See if there's some breakthrough guys.
Maybe Ishmael Sopsha. That's a guy that Alabama fans would really love to break through. I think he's a guy that might be a lot better with a year under his program, getting in the conditioning program and getting more experience. He might be more of a late bloomer than some, but I think he's got a lot of talent.
Yeah, and when he came in, because he wasn't an early enrollee, so he came in during the summertime, and it was like one of the hottest Tuscaloosa summers that there was last year. And
he was feeling it.
He's a big dude. He's like 340 pounds, so he was definitely feeling it. Tim Smith is a new guy.
Right. There's a few new guys.
Yeah, there's a few new guys. By the way, did you see, this is like a completely off topic, but speaking of the defensive line, Antonio Alfano, you guys saw him, right?
Got suspended
back in
again.
the suspended, my goodness, right? It was like Alabama just
I hope he figures it out because he's a super talented guy and has a lot to offer.
I don't know if we'll ever find out. I mean, if he keeps staying in trouble, but
between him and Iobi and Anoma, two guys that have all the talent in the world.
I know,
Can't figure it out.
2 5-stars. Yeah, 2 5-stars gone. But overall, the defensive line, I think, Freddie Roach coming back, there's a lot of storylines. I'm curious to see how, what transitions there. And of course, I think Brian Ray, if he's healthy, he could be a guy who can get after the quarterback. Same with Christian Barmore. He was playing like a man on fire towards the end of the season. Guy that I think a lot of people are really excited about.
So what would be the biggest threat for the defensive line? We talked about it for the offensive line, and this group is a little bit more experienced, I guess. They need some injuries to get repaired completely for this season, but who stands out as maybe the biggest threat to the success of this position group?
I think it's the same thing that Tony said for the offensive line. I think injuries is the big problem. You have not a whole lot of experience, a lot of guys that still need to prove something.
Yeah, you just need somebody to step up. It's not like, in a way, yeah, you got to avoid injuries, but at the same time, there's not that like stability that you have with the offensive line per se. So everyone needs to kind of take that next step up. DJ Dale is great. Let's take the next step up, whether it be Barmore, Young, or Boygbe. Like one of those guys needs to develop into a star guy. I think LeBron Ray even needs to take the next step in his career and kind of be that star guy. And so if that all happens and you can get a good pass rush, this has the talent. I think you look at every position in Alabama, it has the talent to be an elite unit, but it's not as proven as on the other side of the line, where Alabama has one of the best offensive lines in the nation.
Hey guys, right now, give us a thumbs up if you think Christian Barmore will be Alabama's best defensive lineman in 2020. Right now.
I think
I would like it.
He might have
right now.
He might be their sacks leader if you look at just his potential and his pass rushing.
I think overall, when you look at the defensive line, I think it's going to be a better defensive line. You asked with the offensive line, I think it will be. The offensive line I felt was pretty good last year, but I certainly think the defensive line will be better this year. Raekwon Davis is a guy that we always waited for, right? We waited. I think it's safe to say that he really never lived up to his hype at Alabama. I think who knows what the future holds for him, but I just felt that we are always waiting for him. He did grade out well on Pro Football Focus. Maybe he's just not a pass rusher, but
he had those 8 sacks or whatever his first year.
It was sophomore year.
First big year, and then I think he had like 2 combined sacks the remaining 2 years. It's just really tough.
And like Nick Saban says, I think he said that many times you can't judge a defense or maybe even a player based off how they get to the quarterback. But I just felt that there was times where Alabama needed an alpha on defense, whether that was, an outside linebacker or someone like Raekwon Davis, who was a senior and really never stepped up in that role, in my opinion.
I feel like Davis kind of suffered from our expectations. When you look at Davis, a guy that big, a guy that just massive, I think it's possible, he has a great season when he's younger and then maybe expectations build, and maybe if he's, a couple inches shorter, several pounds lighter, maybe expectations are sort of where he ends up.
This defense is definitely going to need to make adjustments in some major ways, because that was the problem this past season, and especially if you look back in that LSU game, it was just making tackles. Who on this defensive line is going to be the aggressor, is going to be the guy that maybe not technically can lead the team as well as other players, but it's going to be the guy that delivers that big hit. Talked about Barmore and some other guys.
Well, yeah, I think it's Barmore. He's a freak, and he's, he was, even last year at times, he was their best pass rushing, option. I really like DJ Dale in this line. I think he gets under. He might not have the stats. I think playing the nose guard position and the 3-4 defense is really a thankless job, but he's a guy that's been compared to Daron Payne, and I think you could see that out of him eventually, and I'm expecting a big year from him.
That's kind of what I think. I was going to say, I feel like the stats may not back it up next year, but I think the defensive line will probably end up playing about as well as DJ Dale ends up anchoring the middle.
Yeah. And that job has so many components to it. He's got to be a run stopper and probably still he's constantly taking on double teams as well in the pass rush. So it's a thankless job at that nose guard position.
And by the end of the season, DJ Dale had his both arms wrapped, his hands. He had something on his leg, on his foot. It was he had so many accessories. He was banged up. But the thing is, that Alabama really does like what he brings to the table. I mean, this is a guy who got here in December after high school. I mean, who gets here in December? Remember when players used to get like in May? No, players are getting like in December and then in January. So DJ Dell, I mean, has a lot of upside. I'd like to see what he can do this coming year, but I think Alabama clearly has a lot of different pieces that they can put into the defensive line. And then new coach, like I said, Freddie Roach. I am curious, though, regarding the pass rush. And I know we're talking about the defensive line, but when I look at the outside linebackers, there's some opportunities for someone to step up. I mean, is it going to be a Chris Allen? Because you're losing Anthony Jennings and Terrell Lewis, and those are two marquee pieces of the defense. And I think Sal Sinceri will have to figure out who he's going to put in there to step up this year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just a matter of finding those right pieces and having these people step up and realizing their potential. I think that's going to be one of the biggest things to see this spring too. Is just
so
seeing the progression
who do you
between
think? Like Chris
guys.
Allen, and then who else is that other guy when you look at an outside linebacker?
King McQuida.
See, he's young. I mean, he's
a young guy.
He's a young guy.
Drew Sanders is another guy. I think could be.
Guy?
Yeah, Chris Braswell. I mean, you look at, they're all young guys that can step up. Ben Davis, maybe. Shoot, I mean, wouldn't that be great if Ben Davis came in and finally just broke out into this
Remember
five-star
that
talent?
sack Ben Davis had against Mississippi State? And we just like completely crushed that guy. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah, I wasn't even I was in Tallahassee, and it was all over Twitter. Like, just because, so many people that follow Alabama football, it's like, Ben Davis, sack, viral.
Hey, sound off in the comment box. I'm curious to get your thoughts on Ben Davis. What do you think this will be Ben Davis's year to play for the Alabama Crimson Tide? I'm curious to see. I want to see.
It would certainly make a lot of Alabama fans happy if he finally did.
If Ben Davis played, it would be. That's all they talk about.
Ben Davis is the 5-star Rudy.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
he is the 5.
I don't know. I hope he does, just because that kid's got his name mentioned so much. It's about.
He's worked. We've seen him work with the inside linebackers. We've seen him work with the outside linebackers. We've seen him be banged up. This is his year. I mean, he's been here for a long time. This is be an opportunity for him to step up. I don't know. I guess we'll have to see.
One of the guys that I think this fan base wants to see succeed the most, a great storyline, and so many incredible storylines surrounding the team this year. But before we get out of here, what's one storyline? Is we're only 4 days away now from that first spring practice. What's maybe the most exciting storyline going into practice number 1 on Friday?
I mean, you got to say it, right? It's the quarterback position. It's got to be the quarterback position. I'm sorry.
They seem to be tired of
whenever
the
there is
position
any
talk.
bit of a quarterback battle, no matter what you think of it, it's the most exciting.
No.
So whether you think it's totally Mac or it's totally Bryce or it's totally Italia or it's totally Paul Tyson I don't know what you think about it. It's always the most exciting battle, just because of how much it means to the offense.
Yeah, it's what the fans want to hear about. It's what we're gonna spend most of our time in the spring probably writing about. To pick something else though, I'm interested to see how Alabama starts working in these running backs. It's gonna be a crowded room.
How do they feed? What is it? 6 backs now, and 3 freshmen, and then you got Najee, and then Trey Sanders and Keelan Robinson and Brian Robinson. So 7 backs. Sorry, I can't even count. Yeah, it's a lot.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how 7 are going to see the field this year.
Oh no, but I'm just saying, like, 7 people are wanting to get the ball.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if 5 people are going to see the ball. So
yeah, I think when you look at the running backs and kind of the most interesting storylines kind of going in, it's obviously the quarterback. Everyone's going to have a hot take, and the most. The first thing that we're going to show you is, of course, highlights of Bryce Young. I mean, you guys want to see it. We want to see it. Everybody wants to see how he's developed since he's been here in January. We're all going to get a chance to see him, see how he throws, see how he moves around. We're going to check out the other quarterbacks as well. And I think that's obviously what headlines the spring going in regarding the running backs. Najee Harris coming back. I mean, how huge was that? I mean, you're talking about one of the best running backs in all of college football coming back. You have Trey Sanders, and I think a lot of people want to see what Trey Sanders can do when he's healthy. And this is the guy who said he was going to win the Heisman Trophy as a freshman.
Yeah, we left him off of the earlier discussion. I mean, heck.
I mean, Trey Sanders has, from the small snippets we saw of him, he looks like an all-purpose back. You have Kellen Robinson, who Nick Saban says has the juice, probably one of the faster, quicker running backs. And then you have Brian Robinson, who continues to be utilized in some capacities, a bigger back.
Probably the most powerful back they got.
Probably the most powerful back. And you got all those other running backs that were added as well. Roydell Williams seems to be a guy that a lot of people are excited about. Same with
Jace McClellan
and Kyle Edwards. Hey, so we have a video feature coming up. Tyler was just in New Orleans at the Rivals camp. Actually caught up with Kyle Edwards. That was today, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I caught up with Kyle today.
3 days ago. It's probably been such a long day for you.
It feels like it's been 2 or 3 days. Kyle
Edwards.
I will say, and you'll see it in the video when we put it up later this week. But I asked Kyle. One thing I asked Kyle about before I left is I asked 7 running backs. I said that's a lot of mouths to feed. How do you feel about that competition? And he said his sophomore year in high school, he came in and there were 7 guys, and he said that he earned the number 2 spot, and he didn't have a lot of football experience coming into that sophomore year. So, he said he embraces competition. He said he knows he has to play special teams. He said he's excited to hit somebody on special teams again, which is something that he enjoyed doing in high school. So. He seems like a guy that has the right mindset to succeed in this program, whether that's in the short term next year from a running back standpoint, or whether he has to wait a little longer to really work into the rotation.
He's kind of the forgotten guy in an already deep, when you look at the first 2 names we mentioned when we talked about the running backs in this year's class were Jason Roydell, and then, we throw in Kyle Edwards. It's like he's the 3rd guy, and so I think he comes in here with basically no pressure, can kind of make a name for himself, not a lot of expectations on him, could really come in and shoot up. I mean, I think if you're from a young perspective, not going to necessarily have that crippling hype that comes with being a young prospect or a new face at Alabama at a skill position. So that could be an advantage. You can kind of catch people by surprise.
Now, if you guys follow, all our content, Tony was actually at the signing ceremony for Roydell Williams, right?
I was, yeah.
What did you like about Roydell Williams? One of the things that I got from the interview, and you can watch it on our YouTube channel, just type in Roydell Williams, Bama Insider. I thought he was very articulate. He was like talking to a grown man. What was your takeaways from speaking with Roydell?
He's just a humble guy, and a lot of times when you talk to these kids and they're a star in high school, they're not as humble. He's a really down-to-earth guy, and I think he's a guy that knows, like you were saying, that he's going to have to come in and compete. He's not afraid of competition, and I think that's huge. He's another guy that can do a lot of things, can catch the ball. They even kind of put him at quarterback at sometimes, so he's a guy that can do just a lot of things in the backfield, and obviously being from Hueytown, knows what Alabama's all about, knows the tradition of the program. You could put him in there. Maybe he makes a run and gets some playing time at running back. If not, then a special teams. And, he's got a bright future at Alabama, though, either way.
I think I'm going to throw in a wild card for my favorite storyline going into spring practice here. I'm going to say the kicking game.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Will Reichert, is this kid for real? Does Alabama finally have a kicker that is going to make simple extra points even? So many storylines, and I think you guys hit on it, especially with the running backs, how much depth is going to be on this Alabama team to start 2020. That's about all the time we have for today, although we're going to get into that depth further on the next episode, hit some other position groups and some more of these spring storylines as we get closer to practice this Friday. I'm Trinity with Kyle Henderson, Tony Sukalis, and Tyler Waldrop. This has been the BamaInsider.com podcast. Thank you for listening.
Hey, and before you guys go, be sure and give us a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. We appreciate you guys being here.